The Last Heartbeat. Movie night at the Europa colony was Emily Taylor's favorite time of the week. The massive biodome ceiling became a canvas for whatever film the colonists had chosen, and tonight's feature was an ancient superhero movie that her little brother, Adam, had been begging to watch for months. Emily sat cross-legged on their family's designated cushion area, her 8-year-old frame practically vibrating with excitement as she shared her popcorn with Adam. Their mother, Dr. Catherine Taylor, had finally taken a break from her research at the Deep Core facility to join them. It was perfect. The first warning came during the movie's climactic battle scene. Most of the colonists thought the rumble was part of the film's sound effects. Emily knew better. She'd grown up on Europa, and she recognized the different types of ice shifts and pressure changes. This was something new. "Mom," she whispered, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "Something's wrong." Dr. Taylor had already pulled out her data pad, her face illuminated by its soft blue glow. The colors drained from her face as she read the emergency alerts. "Everyone," she shouted, standing up. "We need tow." The impact cut her off. The biodome's protective shields failed in a cascade of sparkling energy, and the crystalline structure above them began to crack. Emily watched in horror as the stars became visible through the spreading web of fractures. Warning klaxons finally began to blare, but it was too late. The dome was compromising too quickly for an orderly evacuation. Emily saw the fear in her mother's eyes as she tried to activate their emergency suits. The systems were dead. "Emily, Adam, hold on to me," Dr. Taylor screamed over the growing chaos. But Emily could see what her mother couldn't. The structural support above Adam was about to give way. Time seemed to slow. Emily had watched enough emergency training videos to know what exposure to Europa's surface environment would do. She knew that the emergency shelters would only deploy if they detected enough survivors. She knew that her little brother's suit was closer to activating than hers. She made her choice. Emily pushed Adam as hard as she could toward their mother, then slammed her hand on his suit's manual override. The protection foam deployed instantly, cocooning him in a protective shell. She smiled, even as the dome finally gave way. The vacuum hit like a physical force. Emily felt the moisture on her eyes begin to boil as the pressure dropped. Her lungs burned as they tried to hold onto what little air remained. Through the pain, she saw other emergency suits activating, other children being protected. She thought she heard her mother screaming her name. As her consciousness began to fade, Emily saw them. Dark shapes moving against the stars, too geometric to be natural, too purposeful to be debris. They had done this. They had attacked her home. With her last moment of clarity, Emily felt something strange. It wasn't pain anymore, but a sort of resonance. Every cell in her body seemed to vibrate with an energy she'd never known existed. As her heart fought to beat one last time, that energy built to a crescendo. Her final heartbeat released something into the void. A pulse of energy, invisible to normal sensors, but felt by systems long dormant, rippled through space. It carried with it everything Emily was: her love for her brother, her bravery in the face of death, her rage at those who had destroyed her home. The pulse traveled faster than light, reaching Earth in an instant. Deep within the planet's core, in places no human had ever reached, ancient machines began to wake. They had waited eons for this signal, this specific configuration of energy that could only come from the perfect sacrifice. As emergency teams finally reached the Europa colony, as Dr. Taylor clutched her son's protected form and wept for her daughter, as the dark ships vanished back into the void, Earth's core began to pulse with a rhythm that matched Emily's last heartbeat. Humanity's greatest weapon had been armed by a child's choice to die so others might live. The war would begin soon. Ancient Guardians. The memorial service for the Europa colony victims was held at the United Earth Assembly in New Geneva. Dr. Catherine Taylor stood rigid, holding Adam's hand as names were read from a list that seemed never to end. Her daughter's name would be last. Emily had been the final casualty, her sacrifice ensuring others had time to reach safety. Reporters crowded the assembly steps, their cameras focused on the families. They were waiting for reactions to the military's confirmation that the attack had been deliberate, evidence of first contact gone horribly wrong. Catherine didn't care about any of that. She was focused on the small urn in her free hand, containing what little they'd recovered of Emily. The ground trembled. At first, everyone assumed it was an equipment malfunction. The assembly's holograms flickered, screens went dark, and a low hum filled the air. Then the seismographs started registering activity from the Mariana Trench, at depths never before recorded. Dr. Taylor, a military aide, appeared at her side. "You're needed in the science wing." Immediately. She found the wing packed with scientists and military personnel, all staring at displays showing the same thing. Something massive was rising from the ocean floor. Similar reports were coming in from the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and the Indian Ocean. "It's responding to a signal," Dr. James Morrison, her old mentor, explained as she entered. "One that started at Europa and somehow penetrated to Earth's core. But that's not why we called you here." He gestured to a screen showing complex DNA sequences. "This is why." Catherine stared at the display, her scientific mind warring with disbelief. "That's Emily's DNA from her last physical. But that's not possible. These sequences, they're not human." "They are now," Morrison said softly. "Whatever happened up there changed her at the molecular level. And look at this." He switched to another image. Strange symbols rising from the ocean depths. They matched patterns now present in Emily's modified genetic code. The building shook again, harder this time. Outside the windows, everyone could see it. A massive structure breaking the surface of Lake Geneva, water cascading off ancient metal that somehow still gleamed. As it rose, patterns of light raced across its surface, forming symbols identical to those in Emily's DNA. "My God," someone whispered. "It's some kind of key." Catherine felt something pull her forward. The urn in her hands had grown warm, and the ashes inside were moving, swirling of their own accord. A beam of light from the structure touched the urn, and for a brief moment, Catherine swore she could feel Emily's presence. "The structure's sending a message," a linguist announced, his voice shaking. "It's in every language, ancient and modern. It says, the Guardians accept your sacrifice." More displays lit up as similar structures rose worldwide. Each one bore the same markings, each one responded to the same signal. Humanity was witnessing the awakening of something left behind long ago, waiting for just the right moment, just the right catalyst. "There's more to the message," the linguist continued. "The children of Earth have proven worthy. The fleet awakens." As if in response, the structure split open, revealing a vast chamber within. And there, suspended in fields of energy, were ships unlike anything human eyes had ever seen. They were beautiful and terrible, organic yet mechanical, tools of war that looked like works of art. Catherine felt the urn pulse once more. The ashes inside had formed into a perfect double helix, glowing with the same energy as the ships. She understood then. Emily's death hadn't been just a tragedy. It had been a key, turned in an ancient lock. "Dr. Taylor," Morrison said, his voice barely a whisper, I think your daughter just helped us find Earth's hidden guardians." The ships began to rise, one by one, into the sky. Humanity's future had been hidden beneath their feet all along, waiting for a child's sacrifice to wake it. And somewhere in the void, the forces that had attacked Europa felt a shiver of ancient fear. The fleet rises. The Pacific shipyards, as the media had taken to calling them, stretched for miles beneath the ocean's surface. Dr. Catherine Taylor watched through the reinforced windows of a military submarine as massive machines, dormant for millennia, constructed vessels that defied understanding. The assembly process is unlike anything we've seen, Admiral Chen explained, standing behind her. They're growing rather than building. Each ship seems to be part organic, part mechanical. He paused, checking his tablet. And they all react to you. Catherine nodded. She'd felt it from the moment they'd approached. A humming in her bones that matched the rhythm she'd felt from Emily's urn. The ships were singing to her, a song of loss and purpose. Not just me, she said, pressing her hand against the cool glass. Sarah Martinez from the Mars Colony Defense. Michael Chung from the Lunar Mining Station. Robert Wilson from the Ganymede Research Post. She turned to face the Admiral. What do we all have in common? You lost children to space, he answered quietly. All within the last year. Above them, a new ship was taking shape. Unlike human vessels, with their harsh angles and practical designs, this one moved like a living thing. Its hull rippled with colors that shouldn't exist in nature, and its form seemed to change depending on how you looked at it. They're ready for the first test, a young lieutenant announced, entering the observation room. The chosen commanders are assembled in Bay 3. Catherine found herself in a room with 11 other parents, each carrying the weight of loss in their eyes. Before them, through another set of windows, waited 12 ships, each unique in design, but all bearing the same strange symbols that had been found in Emily's changed DNA. The ships are asking for something, Dr. Sarah Martinez said, her hand pressed against her heart. They want us to prove ourselves. The others felt it too. A challenge, not of combat skills or technical knowledge, but of something deeper. The ships were testing their pain, their resolve, their willingness to face the void that had taken their children. Catherine stepped forward first. I accept, she said, though no one had spoken the challenge aloud. The ship before her, the one she'd watched grow, responded with a pulse of light that matched her heartbeat. The integration chamber, as the engineers called it, was unlike any cockpit she'd ever seen. As the ship's hull sealed around her, Catherine found herself in a space that seemed to breathe. Surfaces moved like liquid metal, forming controls that responded to her thoughts rather than her touch. Neural interface active. A voice announced in her mind. Compatibility testing begins now. The ship launched itself from the underwater bay, moving with an acceleration that should have crushed her. Instead, Catherine felt like she was flying under her own power, the ship an extension of her body. They broke the surface, water streaming off an energy shield she could feel rather than see. Then the real test began. The ship's sensors detected something the Earth's defense systems had missed, an asteroid nearly a mile wide, on a collision course with the planet. It had been cloaked, deliberately aimed. The enemy was testing Earth's new defenses. Without conscious thought, Catherine and her ship moved to intercept. The weapons systems activated, not firing traditional munitions, but something that bent space itself. The asteroid didn't explode, it simply ceased to exist, converted to energy that her ship absorbed and recycled. When she returned to the bay, the other parents had completed their own trials. Each had faced a different test. Each had proven their worth. The ships had chosen them as much as they had chosen the ships. You understand now, Admiral Chen said, as Catherine emerged, her eyes glowing slightly with residual energy. Why it had to be you. Why it had to be parents who lost everything. Yes, Catherine replied, watching as more ships took shape in the yards below. Because we have nothing left to lose, and everything left to protect. In orbit, hundreds more ships were growing, preparing for the war that was coming. The enemy had thought Earth defenseless, had thought they could hunt children with impunity. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The fleet was rising, born from ancient technology and powered by a force stronger than any weapon. A parent's love, a parent's grief, a parent's rage. Memory of the precursors. The ship's memory chamber defied physics, as humans understood it. Dr. Catherine Taylor floated in what appeared to be a sea of stars, her body suspended in a field of pure information. Around her, other chosen commanders experienced the same vision. The truth of Earth's past, revealed through technology so advanced it bordered on magic. We were not the first, the ship's consciousness whispered in her mind. We were not even the second. Your world has known many children. The stars shifted, forming images of a civilization that had reached its peak when Earth's continents still formed a single mass. Their cities had touched the sky, their ships had danced between stars, and their understanding of reality had transcended the physical. They called themselves the Shapers. Sarah Martinez's voice came through the neural link. They all shared. They knew they were going to fall, but they planned for it. The vision changed, showing a great war that had raged across the galaxy. The enemy, ancient even then, had sought to feed on the energy of young species, to harvest the unique power generated by the death of the innocent. The Shapers had stood against them, but at a terrible cost. Our children were their favorite target. The ship's memory continued. Each young life taken fueled their dark technologies. We could not allow this to continue. Catherine watched as the Shapers made their choice. Rather than face extinction, they would hide their legacy in the most ingenious way possible. They would become part of Earth itself. Their technologies, their ships, their very essence would be encoded into the planet's core, waiting for the right species to evolve. You engineered us, Catherine realized, the truth flooding through her. You changed Earth's development to create humanity. Yes, the ship acknowledged. We shaped your evolution over millions of years. We needed a species that could feel deeply enough to power our weapons, yet think clearly enough to use them wisely. The capacity for love, for loss, for rage. These were not accidents. The vision shifted again, showing the ships themselves. Each one contained the preserved consciousness of a Shaper child, their innocent deaths converted into a power source that could never be corrupted by the enemy. They had given their lives willingly, knowing they would sleep until they found new partners worthy of their sacrifice. Emily, Catherine whispered, her heart aching. Her death. It wasn't random, was it? No. The ship's response carried infinite sadness. Her neural pattern matched our last princess, the final child to join our fleet. When the enemy attacked your colony, they knew what would happen. They sought to destroy the key before it could turn. The other parents absorbed this truth with a mixture of grief and purpose. Their children had not died by chance. They had been targeted because they carried the potential to wake Earth's guardians. The enemy had been hunting for generations, killing children who showed signs of the right neural patterns. But they failed. Robert Wilson's voice rang through the link. Our children's deaths didn't prevent the awakening. They triggered it. The memory chamber filled with new images. The enemy's fleet, vast and dark, already moving through the outer solar system. They had expected Earth's defenses to sleep forever, had planned to harvest humanity at their leisure. Instead, they had awakened an ancient power. We offer you a choice, the ship said. As the vision faded, you may step away from this war. We would not judge you for this choice. Catherine felt the agreement of the other parents through their shared link before she spoke. Our children are gone, but we can save others. We can end this hunt. Then let us show you the full extent of your inheritance, the ship replied. The chamber lit up one final time, downloading the combined knowledge of the Shaper civilization directly into their minds. Weapons that could reshape reality, engines that could fold space, and something more. A way to ensure no other species would ever lose their children to these hunters again. The time for mourning was over. The time for justice had begun. The price of power. General Marcus Wade stood before the United Earth Council, his uniform pristine, his expression stern. "These weapons cannot be left in the hands of civilians," he declared, pointing to the holographic display of the fleet. "No matter their personal losses, the chain of command must be maintained." Behind him, screens showed military forces surrounding the emergence points of the ancient ships. Troops in power armor stood ready, their weapons trained on the vessels that had risen from Earth's oceans. Dr. Catherine Taylor watched from the gallery, her hand absently touching the crystal pendant that had once been Emily's ashes. Through her neural link, she could feel the other commander's tension. The ships were not pleased. "The fleet is not a weapon to be commanded," she said, standing. "It's a legacy to be honored." The general's face hardened. "Security teams, move in. Take control of the primary vessels." At that moment, every light in the building went dark, then across the city, then across the continent. A rolling blackout swept the globe as the ships responded to the threat. Through her link, Catherine heard the ship's unified voice. "We do not serve those who would command through force. We serve those who understand the price of loss." The soldiers approaching the ships found their power armor shutting down. Weapons turned to dead metal in their hands. The ships had not just affected the power grid, they had selectively disabled any technology that could be used against them. "The fleet requires more than authority," Sarah Martinez said, joining Catherine. "It needs understanding. The ships run on processed grief and love, emotions so pure and powerful they can be converted to energy. You cannot command that." The council chamber erupted in chaos as more screens activated, showing new sensor data. A second enemy fleet had been detected, larger than the first, already past Pluto's orbit. The hunters had decided to strike before Earth's new defenses could be fully awakened. "You have a choice," Catherine addressed the council. "You can waste time fighting us for control, or you can let us do what we were chosen to do, what our children died to enable." General Wade's face went through a complex series of emotions before setting into grim understanding. His own daughter had died on Mars 3 years ago, in what had been labeled a pressure seal failure. Now he wondered if it had been something else. "The neural interface is rejecting military personnel," a technical advisor reported. "It's only accepting those who've lost children to space-related incidents. The loss has to be recent, personal, and—" He paused, checking his data. "The grief has to be still fresh." Catherine felt a new presence in the neural link. General Wade was compatible after all. His daughter's death had left the same kind of wound they all carried. The ships had recognized his pain. "I didn't understand," Wade said softly. "The power doesn't come from the ships themselves. It comes from us, from what we lost." Through their shared connection, the chosen commanders felt the ship's approval. Images flowed between them, the enemy fleet's approach, the weapons they would need, the price each commander would have to pay to use them. To power the strongest weapons, they would have to relive their most painful moments, channel their grief into pure energy. The ships would protect them from the worst physical effects, but the emotional toll would be devastating. "We accept," they said in unison, their words echoing through the chamber. The lights returned, but changed. They pulsed with a new energy, a combination of ancient technology and human emotion. Across the globe, the ships began to move, taking up defensive positions around the planet. Catherine touched her pendant again, feeling the energy that had once been her daughter. The enemy was coming, thinking they would find an easy target. Instead, they would find parents who had nothing left to lose, commanding ships powered by the purest energy in the universe, a love that survived even death. "Emily," she whispered, "this is for you, for all of them." Above, the ships began to glow, reading themselves for the battle to come. Humanity's counter. The battle began in the orbit of Saturn. Catherine watched through her ship's enhanced senses as the enemy fleet emerged from fold space, their vessels black as the void between stars. They moved like a swarm of locusts, countless small ships surrounding massive harvest vessels. They're different than before. Sarah Martinez's voice came through the neural link. These aren't scout ships. They're here to feed. The chosen commanders had positioned their fleet in a crescent formation, using Saturn's rings as both cover and weapon. The ice and rock would provide raw material for what was to come. Show them, Catherine whispered to her ship. Show them what we really are. The response was immediate. The sleek metal hull of her vessel began to change, flowing like liquid mercury. The other ships followed suit, their true forms emerging for the first time. Where there had been ships, there were now dragons, massive spacefaring creatures of living metal and energy, their wings spanning miles, their eyes burning with the same fire that had powered the Shaper's greatest weapons. By all that's holy, General Wade's voice trembled through the link. They're beautiful. The enemy fleet halted their advance. Through the enhanced sensors, Catherine could feel their confusion, their fear. They had expected to find primitive vessels, not these ancient guardians. Her dragon's consciousness merged more deeply with her own, sharing memories that stretched back millions of years. She saw the first battles between the Shapers and the Hunters, saw how the dragons had been created as the ultimate weapon against those who would feed on children's deaths. They're scanning us, Robert Wilson reported, trying to understand what we are. Let's show them, Catherine said. As one, the dragons opened their maws. Energy coursed through their bodies, powered by the grief and love of their human partners. Saturn's rings began to move, ice and rock transforming into streams of pure energy that the dragons absorbed and channeled. The enemy launched their first attack, a wave of dark energy designed to consume life force. It washed over the dragons without effect. The Hunters had never faced creatures powered by energy they couldn't steal. Now we learn why they really fear us, Catherine said, feeling Emily's memory burning in her heart. The pain of loss transformed into pure power, flowing through the neural link into her dragon's weapon systems. The dragons attacked. Their breath weapons weren't simple energy beams. They fired streams of concentrated reality, turning the very fabric of space-time into a weapon. Enemy ships caught in the blast didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist, their component atoms scattered across multiple dimensions. Through the neural link, Catherine received the enemy's transmission. Their language was ancient, but the dragons translated. This is impossible. The Shapers fell. Their guardians were destroyed. We slept, Catherine replied through the link. We waited. And now we found new partners who understand the price of fighting you. The dragons moved in perfect formation, their wings cutting through space like solar flares. Each one carried the spirit of a Shaper child, now joined with a human who had lost their own child to the void. It was a partnership born of shared pain and common purpose. The enemy fleet tried to retreat, to return to fold space. But the dragons were faster, their ancient technology far beyond what the Hunters had stolen over the millennia. Space itself seemed to reject the enemy's presence, as if reality had chosen a side. They're trying to contact their main fleet, Sarah reported, warning them. Good, Catherine said, her dragon's eyes glowing with building energy. Let them know what waits for them. Let them know that Earth is protected. The battle ended not with a grand explosion, but with a ripple of unlight, as the last enemy ship was unmade. The dragons hovered in formation, their metal scales reflecting Saturn's glow, their presence a declaration to any who would threaten Earth's children. Catherine felt Emily's memory pulse through the neural link, joining with the ancient consciousness of her dragon. Together, they had written a new chapter in Earth's defense. The Hunters would return with a larger fleet, but now they knew the cost of threatening the world protected by dragons born of grief and love. A parent's vengeance. The moon's surface had been transformed. What was once cratered gray stone now rippled with veins of living metal, the same material that formed the dragon's scales. Catherine stood in the command center, watching as the lunar defense matrix came online. "They're here," Sarah Martinez said, her eyes glowing with the neural link's energy. The main fleet just emerged from fold space. Thousands of ships, maybe more. Through the windows, they could see the enemy armada blotting out the stars. The harvest ships were enormous, each one large enough to swallow a small moon. Behind them came the processing vessels, their dark hulls decorated with the bones of 1,000 dead worlds. "All commanders to your dragons," General Wade's voice echoed through the base. "This is what we've prepared for." Catherine ran to the launch bay where her dragon waited. The living metal flowed around her as she entered, the neural link strengthening until she could feel every scale, every pulse of energy. Through their shared connection, she felt Emily's presence stronger than ever. "They're broadcasting," Robert Wilson reported as the fleet took formation. "Broadcasting on all frequencies." The enemy's message boomed through their minds. "We offer terms. Surrender your dragons, and we will restore your children to life. We have the technology. We have always had it." Catherine felt the shock ripple through the neural network. Every parent in the fleet experienced the same moment of desperate hope, the same terrible temptation. Their dragons, sensing their pain, shared a memory. It was ancient, from the time of the Shapers. The hunters had made this offer before, on 1,000 worlds. Those who accepted found their children returned, but wrong, empty. The returned children were shells, their life force used to power the very ships that had killed them. "You dare." Catherine's voice carried the rage of every parent in the fleet. "You dare offer to desecrate them further." The lunar defense matrix activated. The moon's surface split open, revealing weapon systems that the Shapers had hidden there when Earth was young. The dragons connected to the matrix, their power amplified 1,000-fold. "Show them," Catherine commanded. "Show them every child they've taken." Energy pulsed through the fleet. From each dragon came projections, ghostly images of the children who had been lost. Not just their own children, but all of them. Millions of faces, from thousands of worlds, going back millennia. Each one a life cut short, each one a heart stopped too soon. The enemy fleet faltered as the images reached them. For the first time, they were forced to see their victims as more than fuel, forced to witness the weight of their crimes. "Emily," Catherine whispered, feeling her daughter's memory pulse through the neural link. "Lead us home." The dragons attacked as one. Their breath weapons combined with the lunar matrix, creating a wave of pure retribution. Reality itself bent around the blast, time and space warping to accommodate its power. Enemy ships began to dissolve, their stolen energy released back into the universe. The harvest vessels tried to flee, but the dragons were everywhere, their wings cutting through space like blades through silk. From the processing ships came a sound, a scream that no human was meant to hear. The collected energy of countless murdered children, finally breaking free. It should have been devastating, but the dragons caught it, channeled it, purified it. The energy flowed through the lunar matrix, transforming from something dark and terrible into pure light. Where it touched the enemy fleet, ships simply ceased to be. Not destroyed, but unmade, as if they had never existed. "For the children," Catherine said, her dragon's roar echoing her words. "For all of them." The final battle lasted less than an hour. When it was done, the space around Earth was clear of enemy ships. The ghosts of the children faded away, but not before each one smiled, finally at peace. The dragons hovered in formation, their scales reflecting Earth's light, their presence a promise. Never again would the hunters take a child from any world. Never again would parents know the pain of such loss. Through the neural link, Catherine felt Emily's presence one last time, not as a ghost or memory, but as pure love, transformed into the energy that would protect her world forever. Legacy of the Stars. 1 year after the final battle, Dr. Catherine Taylor stood in the New Earth Defense Academy's Great Hall, watching as the first class of Dragon Riders graduated. The massive chamber had been built using Shaper technology, its ceiling a living map of the galaxy that showed the location of every world now under Earth's protection. "They're so young," Sarah Martinez said, standing beside her. The neural link they shared had changed over the year, becoming something deeper, a bond between warriors who had faced the darkness together. "They have to be," Catherine replied, watching as the candidates approached the 12 original dragons. The ships, the dragons, they need that youth, that hope. The integration process had changed since their time. Now, instead of requiring the death of a child, the dragons could bond with those who carried the right neural pattern. Always young parents, always those who understood both love and the fear of loss. Above them, through the living ceiling, they could see the defense network that now surrounded Earth. Stations built with Shaper technology dotted the solar system, each one housing dragons and their riders, ready to protect not just their world, but any world that asked for help. The Shapers would be proud, General Wade said, joining them. The last year had aged him, but his eyes were clear. "We've done more than just defend ourselves. We've changed the balance of power in the galaxy." He was right. After the destruction of the Hunter fleet, other species had emerged from hiding. Civilizations that had been forced to watch their children die. Worlds that had lived in fear for generations. They came to Earth not as supplicants, but as allies. The dragons had shared their knowledge freely. Clean energy, medical technology that could heal almost any wound, engines that could cross galaxies in days. But more important than the technology was the promise. Never again would a child die alone in the dark. Never again would parents face such loss without hope of justice. "It's time," Catherine said, as the ceremony began. The new riders stepped forward one by one, each approaching a dragon. The neural link activated, and the great hall filled with light as ancient minds met young ones, as the legacy of the Shapers found new champions. Through her own link, Catherine felt Emily's presence, not as the sharp pain of loss it had once been, but as a warm certainty. Her daughter's death had started this, had awakened Earth's guardians, but her legacy was so much more. "The Taylor Protocol," Sarah said softly, reading from a datapad. "Every spacefaring species now follows it. Every child born on every world has a dragon watching over them. The hunters are gone, and no one will ever take their place." The ceremony concluded with the traditional flight. The great hall's ceiling opened to the stars, and dragons both old and new took to the sky. They flew in formation, their scales catching sunlight, their wings painting aurora across the atmosphere. Catherine's dragon called to her, and she felt the familiar surge of joy as they merged. Together, they led the flight, dancing between planets, showing the new riders what it meant to be part of this legacy. Through the neural network that connected all dragons and their riders, she shared a memory. Emily standing in the Europa colony's biodome, looking up at the stars with wonder rather than fear. It was how she wanted her daughter to be remembered, not as a victim or a sacrifice, but as a child who loved the stars. The Shapers left us a message she broadcast to all the riders, new and old. They chose us not just for our capacity for grief, but for our ability to move beyond it, to take loss and turn it into protection for others. The dragons roared in unity, their sound carrying through space itself. On 1,000 worlds, children looked up at their skies and felt safe. Parents put their little ones to bed without fear. The age of the hunters was over. The legacy of the stars had been passed to new hands, and they would guard it well. for Emily, for all the children, forever.